In its offensive against Hamas, Israel's military is shifting its focus further south. In the last 24 hours, airstrikes and artillery fire have hit targets in central and southern Gaza, killing at least 165 Palestinians. That is according to local officials. The United Nations estimates that some 100,000 Gazans are newly displaced, many of them not for the first time. Israeli forces say they're making progress in their search for weapons depots and secret hideouts used by Hamas. It is designated a terrorist organization by the US, Germany, and several other countries.
Israeli troops attacking a southern Gaza base from where Hamas militants presumably set out to invade Israel on October 7th. This footage from Israel's military shows an ongoing operation to gain control of the site. The goal? Dismantling Hamas infrastructure and tracking down its leaders' hideouts. Israel's military says it has destroyed several Hamas tunnels all over the Gaza Strip, this latest one in the north.
We found a very significant Hamas tunnel network, a network used by senior officials. It's very deep, deeper than the previous ones. This tunnel is different. It has an elevator that goes down a very long tunnel shaft.
The fighting has led to one of the worst humanitarian crises in the Gaza Strip. Now, Israel is expanding its operations in the area around the southern city of Han Yunis. The local Nasser hospital says it's running out of supplies. Space is limited, but the patients keep coming.
The hospital is receiving a lot more than its capacity. In fact, we are functioning at 300% capacity. The beds are full. Most of the time, one bed is holding 2 patients at the same time, and we are basically short on all sorts of medical supplies.
Many of those brought to hospitals are collected by members of the Red Crescent, who transport the dead and wounded through streets filled with debris. And with no signs of a de-escalation, there appears to be no respite for a population caught in the crossfire. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, Israel's offensive has killed more than 21,500 Palestinians. The United Nations estimates that about 85% of Gaza's population is now displaced.
For more, we can talk to Bushra Khalidi. She is the policy lead for the Palestinian territories for Oxfam and joins us today from the occupied West Bank. Welcome. Bushra, what can you tell us about the situation in Gaza after these latest Israeli strikes?
Well, I'm in fact personally affected by what's happened this week in Gaza, especially in the Maghazi massacre on Christmas Eve. I have my family in Maghazi refugee camp at the moment. A distant relative of ours lost, his son lost 2 legs in that attack. And now is the question, and for my family including, is where do we go next? And where is safe for us to go next? They've already been displaced 3 times. This is the story of probably most people in Gaza. Where there's nowhere to go. They're trapped in a small strip of land with no food, no water, no proper health care, no electricity, no fuel, no telecom, and very, very little aid coming in. And even whatever aid comes in could never be enough to really meet the needs of an entire city devastated.
I'm so sorry to hear about your family member there. This is clearly an issue affecting you personally as well. I'm sorry to jump in. We are just hearing, though, that Israel's military has announced a 4-hour tactical pause in fighting in the south of the Gaza Strip. And I'm wondering, from your professional experience, how much you think these temporary breaks like this could help aid workers to do their jobs?
Absolutely nothing. 4 hours to meet the needs of 2.2 million people. We're talking about half of which are children. Many are sick. Many are wounded. It's absolute chaos. People are fighting for their lives every single day. 4 hours is meaningless, really. It's just like the truce, a few weeks ago, and us humanitarian organizations were raising the alarm bell on this, and how a 5-day pause is nothing in comparison to the needs that we're seeing. We're talking about almost 60 to 70,000 people injured, many of which with extremely traumatic injuries. We're talking about people already in hospitals. We're also talking about elderly. My parents-in-law are elderly people. They need medication for their hearts and different kind of things that they can't even get. So it's not just about how much aid comes in in the 4 hours. It's about a complete and permanent ceasefire, an end to the relentless bombing, an end to the war crimes that we're seeing being committed, and a restoration of services and a proper environment for humanitarian workers to work in. This is not an environment where we would be okay as humanitarian workers to send our teams to deliver aid in. It would breach our duty of care to our own teams.
Well, thank you very much for joining us to share your personal experience and the work of aid workers as Israel says it is continuing its offensive against Hamas there. That is Bushra Khalidi, Oxfam's policy lead for the Palestinian territories. We very much appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war with Hamas will continue for many more months, and the border between Gaza and Egypt should be under Israeli control. Thousands of protesters have rallied again in Tel Aviv, demanding the release of Israeli hostages and calling for new elections. Israel is coming under increasing international pressure to find a long-term solution to the conflict. South Africa has filed a case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, accusing it of genocide. Shane Darcy is Deputy Director of the Irish Centre for Human Rights in the School of Law at the University of Galway. I asked him to explain what kind of evidence South Africa is putting forward.
So South Africa has made a very detailed submission to the International Court of Justice in which it goes through the various elements of the crime of genocide. And this is a highly significant development in the context of Gaza. States don't tend to take these interstate cases that regularly. We've seen one more recently in the context of Gambia versus Myanmar, and I think it reflects the seriousness of the situation in Gaza, where we've seen destruction, displacement, and the killing of civilians, including many children, on a scale that outpaces many of the world's recent and indeed ongoing conflicts. The UN has highlighted severe risks of starvation and the spreading of disease as a result of the conditions imposed upon Gaza by Israel.
So what are the chances of this actually stopping the war?
So the idea of taking this particular case from South Africa's perspective, it seems, is to try and put an end to the actions that Israel is taking against Gaza at present. So they are alleging that Israel is engaging in the crime of genocide, what has been referred to as the crime of crimes. They're saying that Israel is violating it's engaged in an ongoing violation of its obligations under the 1948 Genocide Convention. Both South Africa and Israel are parties to the 1948 Genocide Convention. So this allows for interested states to take proceedings to the International Court of Justice. It is, as I said, an unprecedented step, but as I say also, I think it reflects the seriousness of the situation. UN experts have been highlighting the risks of genocide for over a month or so, as well as other crimes that are taking place. So the idea is that if the court makes a pronouncement, such as provisional measures as are requested, it could deter Israel from its activities.
But will Israel heed these warnings from the court?
Well, the response from Israel so far has been to condemn South Africa's approach to the International Court of Justice, calling it a blood libel, saying that it's anti-Semitic. The court can proceed if it finds that the claim is well-founded in both fact and law. Israel, I think, would be well advised to adhere to judgments of the International Court of Justice. Now, it didn't do so previously in the context of an advisory opinion concerning the construction of the wall in the West Bank and along the Green Line, but it does carry significant political fallout if a state is seen to be in defiance of judgments of the International Court of Justice. So we had the court issue provisional measures in the context of Ukraine versus Russia last year. Russia did not abide by those provisional measures, and it does reflect the somewhat pariah status that Russia has at present on the international stage.
Very interesting stuff there from Shane Darcy, human rights law professor from the University of Galway. Thanks very much for being here on DW. Let's go over to our correspondent, Jan-Philipp Scholz. He's in Tel Aviv at yet another demonstration calling for the release of hostages held in Gaza. What are protesters telling you?
They say that they want the government to find ways to release the hostages. They are getting more and more impatient, and they say that they don't think that the war effort alone will bring them home. There have been a lot of reports in Israeli media in the past days that there might be new talks between Israel and the Hamas regarding a possible new hostage deal. Of course, most of the protesters here would support such talks. They might lead eventually into to another hostage deal similar to what we saw a few weeks ago, where the hostages were released and there was a temporary ceasefire. But it's too early to say if this is really something substantial.
So how much support would you say there is for the war at the moment?
Well, in general, a majority of Israelis is supporting the war. They don't necessarily support Prime Minister Netanyahu. Netanyahu has lost a lot of support in recent weeks, but the dramatic humanitarian situation in Gaza is less of a topic here in Israeli media than in many other countries. But there is also a growing peace movement here in Israel. A lot of people say that the war will not bring security, it will only bring more radicalization. But it is a minority. A lot of people still support the war and the military goal to destroy Hamas.
Now, Israel is under growing pressure abroad. South Africa is taking it to the International Court of Justice. The US wants civilians protected. How's the government reacting?
I think the South African move will not have a very strong impact. A spokesperson here already rejected the move and said that he is, I quote, disgusted by it, and South Africa itself is supporting terrorism. So this probably doesn't have a lot of impact. And as you know, the United States have also tried to increase pressure on Israel, but the result has been very limited. South Africa says that they want the courts to take action immediately, to issue measures in the coming days, but a lot of legal experts say this is more of a symbolic act anyway. The only thing that it might change is to increase public pressure and international pressure on Israel.
DW's Jan-Philipp Scholz with the latest there from Tel Aviv.